如果你在聆听时不需要频繁暂停，就能理解大意，那么你的英语积累在日常表达中是完全够用的。我们开始吧。
You ever feel a night so wild it leaves a mark on your memory forever? That feeling sits at the heart of the phrase "paint the town red." The story traces back to a small English town. Quiet. Slow. Almost too polite for its own good. But one night, that quiet cracked open. Before the chaos, the town lived by simple rules. Shops closed early. Streets stayed empty. People whispered more than they talked. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. And everyone tried hard not to cause trouble. But trouble has a way of sniffing out the one place that tries to avoid it. And it came in the form of a young man who was tired of living inside this tiny box. His name was Tom. Tom wanted one night that felt bigger than the town. One night he could keep in his pocket for the rest of his life. The night started harmless. A group of friends. A few drinks. Voices a little louder than usual. Laughter that bounced off the cold brick walls. But something shifted. Maybe it was the full moon. Maybe it was the rush of freedom. Maybe it was just the feeling that if they didn't do something bold now, they never would. Tom spotted a bucket of red paint near a stable. Bright. Wet. Waiting. He dipped his hand in. The paint felt cold, almost shocking. Then he dragged his hand across a stone wall. A long, messy stroke. A streak of pure rebellion. His friends gasped. Then they laughed. Then one of them grabbed another bucket. And another. And suddenly the group wasn't walking anymore. They were running. Shouting. Splashing the paint on doors, on posts, on fences, on anything that would hold color. The quiet town lit up like a wild dream. Red everywhere. Red dripping. Red shouting louder than anyone ever dared to speak. For a moment, Tom felt untouchable. Like the world had opened. Like he finally broke the shell that had held him since childhood. But the noise woke the whole town. Windows opened. Faces appeared. Voices rose in shock, some in anger, some in disbelief. The group didn't stop. They were too far in. Too alive. Too sure that this was the night they would remember long after the paint washed off their hands. No one had ever seen the town look like that. It was wild. It was loud. It was wrong. And yet, it was beautiful in a way no one wanted to admit. By sunrise, the wild red marks covered half the streets. Birds sat on painted fences. People stood outside, staring. Whispers rose like smoke. and Tom felt the weight of what he had done. Not regret. Just the strange heaviness that comes after you break a rule you lived with your whole life. No one forgot that night. And long after the paint faded, the story stayed. People didn't say the night Tom threw paint everywhere. They said something shorter. Something sharper. They said, that was the night they painted the town red. And from there, the phrase spread. Town to town. Voice to voice. Until it traveled far beyond the borders of that quiet place. The phrase didn't stay quiet for long. It moved the way stories move when people can't stop talking about them. It spread through travelers, sailors, and workers who carried tales more easily than luggage. But the phrase didn't only travel. It changed. It grew teeth. It turned into something bigger than one wild night in one tiny town. Years later, people began using it to describe any night that felt too big for rules. A night when someone stepped outside their life and said, "Just this once, I'm going all in." And that's when the phrase took on a second heartbeat. But before it reached America, the phrase made a strange stop in a noisy port city. A place filled with bars, chips, music, and people who seemed allergic to quiet. If Tom's town was silence, this city was thunder. Sailors loved the phrase. They grabbed it like it was made for them. Because sailors lived between storms and calm seas. Between danger and boredom. They knew better than anyone that a night on land had to count. One story says a group of sailors tried to paint the town red with lantern light instead of real paint. They swung red lamps above their heads. They danced in the streets. They shouted old sea songs until the cobblestones shook. People watching from their windows thought the city itself was on fire. But it wasn't fire. It was hunger. Hunger for life, for noise, for a night that felt bigger than the sea waiting outside the harbor. And just when the story seemed like it couldn't get louder, it did. A performer in a small tavern heard the sailors yelling the phrase. He liked how it sounded. Short. Sharp. Easy to shout over music. He began ending his shows by raising his cup and yelling, "Let's paint the town red." Crowds loved it. They shouted it back every night. And soon the phrase slipped out of the tavern like a spark. Merchants carried it. Sailors carried it again. Travelers repeated it without knowing where it began. By the time the phrase reached the United States, it had shed its original story. Most people didn't know Tom. Most people didn't know the little town covered in red paint. But the energy survived. The rebellion survived. The wildness survived. In America, the phrase found new soil. Cities were growing fast. Lights were bright. Music was loud, and people wanted words that matched the size of their dreams. Paint the Town Red fit perfectly. It rolled off the tongue. It sounded like a dare. It felt like a spark in your chest. By then, the phrase meant only one thing. A night where you break your own limits. A night you don't want to explain. A night that stains your memory in the best way. But here's where the story takes another turn. Because the phrase didn't just belong to wild nights anymore. It became a symbol. A quiet one. A hidden one. People started saying it when they felt trapped. When life got too small. When they wanted to step out, even for a moment. The phrase became a tiny door. A door anyone could open with courage. And that's how a wild prank from a quiet English town grew into a sentence that traveled the world. A sentence that meant freedom. A sentence that whispered, "Go live a little." But the phrase still has one more layer. One that most people never hear. A layer tied to the moment right before the night begins. The moment when your heart beats a little faster. When you feel something rising inside you. Something warm. Something bright. Something red. That feeling is the real meaning. The pain is just the excuse. The night is just the stage. The red is the fire inside you. And it took centuries for people to understand that. But the story doesn't end in old towns or loud ports. It lands here. Now. With you. Because the real truth is simple. Everyone carries a little red inside. Some people hide it. Some people forget it. Some people wait too long to let it out. But it's there. That tiny spark that wants one night where you stop worrying about the right thing, the smart thing, the safe thing. A night where you just let yourself breathe. A night that feels like color splashing across a gray wall. And that's why this phrase survived for centuries. Not because of the paint. Not because of Tom. Not because sailors shouted it in some smoky tavern. It survived because every person, at some point, feels the walls closing in. The routine getting too tight. The days repeating like someone hit copy and paste on your life. And when that feeling hits, the phrase shows up like a friend. Simple. Bright. Warm. It whispers, tonight doesn't have to look like yesterday. Maybe your version isn't wild. Maybe you're not running through a town with paint. Maybe you're not singing sea songs until sunrise. Maybe your night is quieter. A walk. A talk. A moment where you choose yourself for once. That counts too. Because Paint the Town Red was never really about the town. Or the red. It was about claiming a moment that belongs only to you. A moment you can put in your pocket. A moment that says, I was alive. I felt something. I stepped out. And maybe you've been waiting for a night like that. Maybe life has been a little too gray lately. Maybe you've been carrying responsibilities so heavy your shoulders forgot what lightness feels like. Maybe you need a spark. A reminder. A tiny push. So here it is. The phrase that traveled centuries lands at your feet. It doesn't demand anything big. It doesn't tell you to break rules or leap off cliffs. It simply asks, what would your red look like tonight? Not tomorrow. Not someday. Tonight. Maybe it's trying something new. Maybe it's calling someone you miss. Maybe it's putting yourself first in a way you haven't in years. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to feel joy without earning it. Whatever your version is, let it be yours. Let it be real. Let it be a small rebellion against the part of your life that tries to stay too quiet. Because the world remembers the nights when people choose color over gray. Life remembers too. And so will you. So when you hear the phrase again, paint the town red, don't think about walls covered in paint. Think about the fire inside you asking for a chance to glow. And maybe, just maybe, tonight is the night you let it.
作为一个母语非英语的人，能把故事听完，你的进步太大了。感谢你收看这个节目。如果你觉得这个节目对你有帮助，请给我一个点赞，或者留下评论，这对我很重要。我们下个视频见。